Otto Jespersen is a Danish linguist, and he was the one who proposed the Lala or the sing-song theory. And in this theory, he suggested that language may have developed from sounds associated with love, play, and especially song. So in his study of the origin of speech, in order to figure out the way as to which language could have originated, he based it on 3 fields of investigation. The first one is the language of children, in which the acquisition of human to language is mirrored to the process by which the child learns to communicate its thoughts through the use of its vocal organs. The second is the language of the primitive races, or the language that are used by the early people. And lastly, the history of language. So the first object of observation in his study is the sound. It was observed that primitive languages or early languages have very long words full of difficult sounds, and that these words are sung rather than spoken. It could be said that languages are originally polysyllabic. It is composed of many syllables, and that the speech is more like a music or a song. Next is the grammar. It was observed that ancient languages have more forms than modern ones. In terms of characteristic features of the structures of languages, in early stages, whether a word is a verb or noun, each word forms contains only minor modifications, while in present days, these forms of words were expressed separately through the use of auxiliary verbs or the prepositions.
Hi everyone, this is Giovanni S. Pangandoyan. So today I'm going to tackle about the units and irregularities. So let me begin with quoting what others have said. So according to Sweet 1898, he is considered the Latin amat, which is amat. It is really 2 words towards the English representative, that the final T being originally pronouns signifying he, she, and it. So it is only the reason of practical convenience that prevent us from writing amat or amati as 2 and he loves as 1 word. Therefore, the really essential difference between amat and he loves is that in the former the pronominal element is expressed by a suffix, in the latter by a prefix. According to Dowsat 1910, in some modern languages, the personal pronoun is just an archaic Greek beginning to amalgamated with verbs as to become a word termination. For example, I give, we give, you give, they give. So it corresponds exactly to the dido me, dido si, dido ti, only that the personal particle is in a different place. According to Bali 1913, if French were a savage language not yet reduced to writing, and a traveling linguist hearing the present tense of the verb, which is aimer. Aimer, pronounced by the natives, would transcribe it in the following ways, which is gm, 2m, lem, nuzimon, voziam, at ilziam. He would be struck towards particularly with the argumentation of the pronominal, subject, and the verb, and it would never feel tempted to draw up a paradigm without a pronouns. In fact, amat or amayet are each of them only 1 word because they can never be divided, and in the same way, we never find anything placed between am and o, which is in the first person amo. This forms as inseparable, which is he loves, but he loves is separable because both he and loves can stand alone. Nor can it be said that English forms like his is to he is or he has, I'd, I had, or I would, he'll is he will. It shows a tendency towards entangling, for however closely together these forms are generally pronounced, each of them must be said to consist of 2 words, as shows by the possibility of transposition. In the form don't, want, can't, there is something like amalgamation of the verbal with the negative idea, but still, it is important to notice that the amalgamation only takes place with the few verbs of the auxiliary had been used. For example, to compare with the negative, I write, he wrote, and for the negative, I don't write, he doesn't write, I didn't work. So, therefore, primitive transposition or towards the primitive linguistics, units must have been much more complicated in point of meaning than those which means we are most familiar. Irregularities, there are some topics that connected towards the comparative linguistics, because comparative linguistics did not attain a scientific character, and towards the principle was established that the relationship of 2 languages had to be determined by a thoroughgoing conformity in the most necessary part of a language. So we see such a declension as I, me, we, us. So the several forms of the paradigm do not at all resemble each other as they do in more recently developed declension. Example of these are masculine and feminine. Masculine, feminine such as the father, mother, man, and wife. We meet also the degrees of comparison like good, better, ill, and worse. While regular forms like happy, happier, big, and bigger. So therefore, the tendency is more and more to denote the same thing by the same means in every case to extend the ending of a large class of words to express a certain modification of the words to express the central idea and until it is used in all other words as well.
Savage tribes. If now it is asked whether the conclusions we have, those arrived, are borne out by a consideration of the language of savage or primitive races nowadays, the answer is that this cannot be lumped together. There are among them many different types, even with regards to grammatical structure. But the more these languages are studied and the more accurately their structure is described, the more also students perceive intricacies and anomalies of their grammar, poetry, and prose. On the whole, the development of languages, even the matter of vocabulary, must be considered to have taken a beneficial course. Still, in certain respect, one may to some extent regret the consequences of this evolution. While our words are better adapted to express abstract things and to render concrete things with definite precision, they are necessarily comparatively colorless. So the old words, on the contrary, spoke more immediately to the senses. They were manifestly more suggestive, more graphic, and pictorial, while to express one single thing, we are not unfrequently obliged to piece the image together bit by bit. So the old concrete words would at once present it to the hearer's mind. As a whole, they were accordingly better adapted to poetic purposes. Nor is this the only point in which we see a close relationship between primitive words and poetry.
So my topic is about emotional songs and primitive singing. So in emotional songs, according to Otto Jespersen's hypothesis on language origins, this is where we can express our emotions through songs. Also, we can express the true meaning of words that come out of our mouth. Emotions and instincts were more primitive and far more powerful. And language is originated as play, and the organs of speech were first trained in this singing sport of idle hours. Next is primitive singing. So singing like any sort of play is due to an overflow of energy, which is discharged in unusual of vivacity of every kind, including vocal vivacity whenever they are excited, exploits of war or of the chase, the deeds of their ancestors, the coming of a fat dog, any incident from the arrival of a stranger to an earthquake is turned into a song. Also, another example of primitive singing is the singing of song.
So, at the end of Jespersen's study, which is the origin of speech, he concluded that language began from half musical analyzed expressions from human beings and with the events that they experienced or they were exposed to. According to him, that languages were composed and has evolved from words and sentences that are difficult to understand with, one that has no clear meaning yet, and that are undeveloped ways or instruments in expressing one's thoughts and emotion. Also, according to him, that language today is the product of the progress that has been made over time. The progress that has made our language to have clarity, become regular and easy to use. So, our discussion ends there, and we hope that you've learned something from our discussion.